Welcome back, everyone. And if you're new here, thank you for joining us tonight. Hotels are supposed to be places of rest, clean sheets, locked doors, and a brief escape from whatever life is outside those walls. But sometimes, behind those quiet hallways and flickering exit signs, there are stories that guests were never meant to tell. Moments that stay burned in your memory long after checkout. Tonight, we're diving into 3 true hotel horror stories. Real accounts from people who checked in expecting a good night's sleep, and instead found something they can never forget. Turn off the lights, settle in, and remember, no matter how safe your room feels, you never really know who stayed there before you. Story 1. The room with the taped door. I travel a lot for work, mostly sales conferences and training sessions for the company I've been with for years. It is not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and the hotels are usually decent. Over time, you stop noticing the little things, the patterned carpets, the faint scent of detergent in the hallways, the generic art hanging above every bed. They all blur together after a while. But there was one trip I will never forget, because of one room. It was late October 3 years ago. I had been driving most of the day through the Midwest and I was exhausted. Around 10 p.m., I pulled off the highway into a small town, one of those places that seems to exist solely because a highway runs through it. Just a few gas stations, a diner, and a 2-story hotel. The sign out front flickered, Lakeview Inn. Funny thing was, there was no lake anywhere nearby. I parked, grabbed my suitcase, and walked inside. The lobby was almost empty, quiet except for the low buzz of a vending machine and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. The woman at the front desk looked startled when she saw me walk in, like she was not expecting anyone else that night. "Checking in?" she asked, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just one night," I said, rubbing my eyes. She typed something on her computer, her nails clicking softly against the keyboard. Her eyes flicked up to me, then back to the screen. "You'll be in room 217, she said finally, sliding me a keycard. I nodded and thanked her, but before I could turn away, she added, "If you hear anything strange tonight, do not worry. Old building. The pipes make noises." It was an odd thing to say, especially in that tone. Almost rehearsed, I forced a smile and said I would be fine. But as I walked toward the elevator, I could feel her eyes following me. The second floor was quiet. Too quiet. Every footstep echoed down the long hallway. The carpet was clean but faded, and some of the wall lamps flickered slightly, giving everything a tired yellow glow. Room 217 was near the end of the hall. When I reached it, the first thing I noticed was the door. There was a small strip of clear tape, running from the frame to the door handle. It looked like someone had placed it there deliberately, to see if the door had been opened. I hesitated. It was probably nothing. Maybe the cleaning staff used it to mark finished rooms. Still, it gave me a weird feeling. I peeled the tape off and unlocked the door. Inside, the room was ordinary. 2 queen beds, a TV on a wooden stand, a small table, and a bathroom near the window. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and something else, something like old water. I set my suitcase down and kicked off my shoes. All I wanted was sleep. But the moment I turned off the lights, I realized something was off. There was a sound, faint but constant. At first, I thought it was the air conditioning unit, but it was coming from somewhere else. Low, muffled like a rhythmic tapping against the wall. Tap, tap, tap. It would go on for 10 seconds, then stop, then start again. After 10 minutes of trying to ignore it, I got up and pressed my ear against the wall. It was coming from the room next door, room 215. It sounded like someone pacing slowly, then stopping, then tapping against the wall right behind the headboard of my bed. I sighed. Someone's probably just restless, I thought. I switched on the TV to drown it out and eventually drifted off. Around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. No sound, no light, just a heavy silence. For a few seconds, I could not figure out what had woken me. Then I noticed the TV and it was off. I was sure I had left it on. I reached for the remote and froze. The tapping was back. Only this time, it was coming from inside my room. Soft, slow, tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the closet. My chest tightened. I stared at the closet door, half open, the darkness inside looking thicker than it should have been. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe the pipes, like the receptionist had said, but then it stopped. And I heard something else, breathing, very slow, very close. It was coming from the closet, from the dark behind those half-open doors. Every hair on my arm stood up. I reached for the lamp, but my hand was shaking so much I knocked it over. The bulb flickered as it rolled onto the carpet, throwing moving shadows across the room. The breathing stopped. I sat frozen, staring at the closet. 10 seconds passed. 20. Then I heard the faint creak of the closet door moving, just slightly. That was enough. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and shone it directly inside. Nothing. Just hangers, a few extra pillows, and an ironing board. Empty. I exhaled hard, heart racing. Get a grip, I told myself. I locked the closet door shut and tried to laugh it off. Maybe I had dreamed it. Maybe I was overtired. Still, I did not sleep much after that. The next morning, I went down to the front desk to check out. The same woman was there. When I handed her the key card, she asked quietly, "Did you sleep okay?" I hesitated, then said, "Actually, do you guys have someone staying in 215? There was some weird noise last night." Her face changed instantly. Her polite smile disappeared. 215? She repeated softly. She turned to the computer and typed something. Then she looked back up at me. "No," she said. "That room is vacant," I frowned. "You sure?" I heard footsteps and tapping from there around midnight. She looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the hallway. Then she leaned in a little closer and said quietly, "You did not open your window last night, did you?" I blinked. "No, why?" She hesitated again, then shook her head. "No reason. Have a safe trip." I left feeling unsettled, but told myself not to overthink it. Weird things happen in hotels. Old buildings, thin walls, tired minds, but before I left, as I was walking toward the parking lot, I noticed something. A maintenance man was walking into the lobby holding a roll of clear tape in one hand. The same kind that had been across my door the night before. That should have been the end of it. But a few weeks later, I had to pass through the same area for work again. Different hotel that time. But as I was driving, I saw the Lakeview Inn sign on the side of the highway. The lights were off. The parking lot was empty. The whole place looked abandoned. Out of curiosity, I asked a gas station clerk about it. He said the hotel had shut down suddenly, something about an incident a month earlier. He did not know details, but according to him, someone had been found inside one of the rooms. He thought it was room 215. The guest had been missing for days before anyone noticed. The room had been sealed with tape by the police until the investigation ended. I drove away with chills running down my spine. Because that night I stayed there. That tape across my door was not placed by the staff. It was placed there by the police young to see if anyone entered that room again. And I did. And that's when I realized the sound from the closet was not a dream. Story 2. The guest who never checked out. I used to work as a night auditor at a small hotel in New Mexico. It was not one of those fancy places, more like a roadside stop for travelers and truckers who needed a bed for the night. 24 rooms, one lobby, and me behind the counter from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It was an easy job most nights. Quiet, predictable. I'd check in a few late guests, run the reports, refill the coffee station, and maybe watch a movie on my laptop until sunrise. But one night, something happened that I still think about every single time I walk past a hotel door. It was a Thursday in February, cold, windy, the kind of night where the highway felt empty and the whole town seemed asleep. I was alone at the front desk, sipping coffee, watching the security cameras. Around midnight, a man walked in. He looked to be in his late 40s, tall, slim, wearing a dark brown coat that looked a little too big for him. His hair was messy and his eyes looked tired. Not the kind of tired you get from traveling, but the kind that sits deep inside you. He placed an ID and a $100 bill on the counter. "Just one night," he said softly. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Sure thing," I replied, starting the check-in. "King bed or 2 doubles?" "Doesn't matter," he said. "I just need some rest." His ID said his name was Mark Yates, address from Arizona. I handed him the key to room 103, first floor, near the back exit. He nodded once, picked up his duffel bag, and walked down the hallway without another word. Something about him gave me a weird feeling. Not exactly threatening, just off. An hour passed. Then 2. I went about my usual routine, folding laundry, checking the security feed, listening to the hum of the vending machines. Around 2:45 a.m., I decided to take a walk around the property. It was something I did to stay awake. Make sure all the doors were locked, parking lot empty, lights on. Everything was fine. Until I reached the hallway near room 103. There was a faint sound coming from inside. Not a TV, not talking, more like whispering. At first I thought maybe he was on the phone, but as I got closer I realized the whispering wasn't in words, it was rhythmic, like he was repeating the same short phrase over and over under his breath. I knocked lightly. "Sir, is everything okay in there?" The whispering stopped. After a few seconds, a voice came from the other side, flat, quiet. "I'm fine." Something in the tone made the hairs on my neck stand up. It wasn't angry. It wasn't scared. It was empty. I stood there a second longer, then nodded to myself and walked away. When I got back to the front desk, I checked the camera feed. The hallway outside 103 was empty, but I could see a shadow moving behind the thin line of light under the door. Back and forth, like he was pacing. At 4 a.m., I started hearing it again, faint, but this time echoing down the hall. It was the sound of someone talking to themselves. Low, steady, like a chant. I turned up the lobby TV to drown it out, but after a few minutes, it just stopped. Then a door creaked open. On the camera, I watched as the door to 103 slowly swung outward. Just a few inches. No one came out. I stared at the screen, waiting, nothing. Then about 10 minutes later, I saw movement again. The door closed. On its own. At 7 a.m., the morning clerk came in to relieve me. Her name was Cheryl, mid-50s, friendly, always humming when she worked. When I told her about the man in 103, she frowned. "He paid cash, right?" "Yeah, probably just tired," she said. "You know how weird people get when they travel too long." I shrugged it off and went home to sleep. But that evening, when I came back for my next shift, Cheryl was waiting for me in the office. She looked pale. "Did that guy from 103 check out?" she asked. "No," I said. "Why?" She held up a clipboard. "His car's still in the parking lot. Checkout time was noon, but the room's still locked." I called a few times, no answer. That uneasy feeling crept back into my chest. I grabbed the spare keycard and said I'd go knock again. The hallway was dead silent. The closer I got to room 103, the heavier the air felt, like the temperature dropped a few degrees. I knocked. No response. "Mr. Yates?" "It's hotel staff. Just checking in." Nothing. I slid the keycard through the slot and pushed the door open. The first thing that hit me was the smell, stale, metallic, like old blood and something rotting underneath it. The room was dark. The curtains were drawn tight, the TV off, the bed untouched, and then I saw him. He was sitting in the corner on the floor, facing the wall, still wearing that same brown coat. His head was tilted slightly to one side, his body motionless. "Sir?" I said, voice shaking. No response. I took a step closer and realized he was dead. His eyes were open, staring at the wall. There was no visible wound, just an odd, twisted smile on his face. A duffel bag sat beside him, half open, filled with nothing but newspapers and a small portable radio. The radio was turned on, but there was no sound, just faint static. The police came within the hour. They questioned me, Cheryl, and everyone who had been on shift that week. Apparently the man's name, Mark Yates, didn't exist. The ID he gave me was fake. They found no credit cards, no phone, no wallet. The car in the lot was stolen from a different state. Whoever he was, he had checked in under a false identity, sat in that room all night whispering to himself, and died before morning. The coroner said there were no signs of trauma, no drugs, no alcohol. He just stopped breathing. But here's where it gets stranger. When they moved his body, they found something written on the wall, behind where he had been sitting. Small letters carved into the paint with something sharp. It said, "Do not let me check out." After that night, the hotel closed room 103 permanently. The door stayed locked, lights off, never rented again. But sometimes when I worked the late shift, I would see things on the camera feed. A shadow moving behind that door, the handle twitching slightly. Once I even heard static through the wall, like a faint radio signal that vanished when I got close. The owner eventually sold the place, and I quit not long after. But a few months ago, I drove past it again. The building looked abandoned. The windows were dark, the parking lot cracked and overgrown. But as I slowed down, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In one of the downstairs windows, the one that used to belong to room 103, a faint yellow light flickered once. And for a split second, I could have sworn I saw the silhouette of a man standing inside facing the wall. I blinked, and the light was gone. They say hotels are transient places. People come, people go. Thousands of lives pass through those rooms, leaving behind nothing but a name on a clipboard and a faint smell of perfume or cigarettes. But sometimes, not everyone leaves. Sometimes, they never check out at all, and that's when I realized he was still in room 103. Story 3. The Night Manager's Key. I worked as a night manager at a hotel in Colorado for almost 4 years. It was a quiet place, mid-range, 3 stories, mostly travelers or business guests passing through. Our busiest hours were always before 10 p.m., and after that it was just me, the hum of the lobby lights and the steady ticking of the clock behind the desk. I liked the stillness of those nights. The way the world outside went completely silent while I handled the last check-ins and balanced the accounts. But one night something happened that I still cannot explain. And every time I think about it, I remember the sound of that key turning in a lock that should not have opened. It was early December, cold enough that the front doors fogged up every time the wind pushed against them. The hotel was half empty. By midnight, only 3 rooms were occupied. A couple on the first floor, a truck driver upstairs, and a young woman in room 313. I remember her because she checked in right before my shift started. She couldn't have been older than 25. Petite, blonde hair tucked under a beanie, polite but distant. She handed me her ID and card, barely spoke. When I gave her the room key, she hesitated for just a second before asking, "Do the doors lock automatically?" "Yeah," I said. "They're all electronic. Just keep your key card on you." She nodded quickly, took the card, and walked off without another word. I remember thinking she seemed nervous, glancing behind her as she walked down the hallway. By 1 a.m., the building was quiet. The only sound was the heater cycling on and off and the faint buzz of the soda machine. I was halfway through some paperwork when I heard the elevator ding. That was odd. No one was scheduled to check in that late. I looked at the monitor. The security cameras showed the elevator doors opening on the 3rd floor. For a second, I saw nothing. Then, just as the doors were closing, I caught the shape of someone stepping out. The angle was bad, but it looked like a man wearing a heavy dark coat. He was walking slowly down the hall toward room 313. I picked up the phone and dialed the room. After 2 rings, the woman answered, her voice quiet and shaky. "Hello?" "Hi, this is the front desk," I said. "Is everything okay up there? I just saw someone get off the elevator near your room." There was a pause. Then she whispered, "He's back." My stomach dropped. "Who's back?" But before she could answer, I heard something in the background. The sound of someone knocking. 3 slow knocks. Right against her door. Then the line went dead. I grabbed the master key and my flashlight and ran for the elevator. When I got to the 3rd floor, the hallway was silent. The air felt thick, heavy, like the heat had stopped working. Every light seemed dimmer than it should have been. Room 313 was at the very end of the hall. The door was closed, but there were scuff marks on the carpet, like someone had been dragging their shoes back and forth. I knocked gently. "Front desk. Are you okay in there?" No answer. I tried again. Nothing. That's when I noticed something. The faintest bit of movement at the bottom of the door. A shadow shifting slowly, like someone was standing just behind it. I stepped back and called out, "Ma'am, I'm coming in." I slid the master key into the lock and froze. The latch was already unlocked. I opened the door carefully. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the bathroom light spilling across the carpet. The bed was made untouched. The woman's luggage sat by the wall, zipped closed. "Hello?" I called again. No answer. I walked further in, scanning the corners with my flashlight. No one. Then I noticed the balcony door. It was open a few inches. The cold air was drifting in, carrying with it the faint sound of traffic from the highway below. I stepped closer. The curtains moved gently in the breeze, brushing against my arm. Outside, the small metal balcony was empty, no sign of anyone. I leaned forward to close the door, and that's when I saw it. A single key card, wedged between the door and the frame. Not a guest key, a master key just like mine. I felt my heart start to race. Someone had been inside this room, and they had access. I locked the balcony door, backed out slowly, and called the police. They arrived within 15 minutes. We searched the entire floor, every hallway, every exit. Nothing. No trace of the woman and no sign of anyone matching the figure I saw on camera. The strangest part? The security footage between 12:45 and 1:10 a.m. was gone. Just static. The tech team said it was a data error, but I had never seen one before and it only affected that floor. The woman never came back. Her belongings stayed in the room for 2 weeks before the police finally cleared it. They said there was no record of her ever leaving the building. No one saw her check out. No one saw her leave through the lobby or the back exit. When her family called weeks later, they said she had been traveling alone, escaping a bad situation. They never said what that situation was, but one detail stuck with me. She had told them she was afraid of someone who had a key to every place she stayed. Months passed. The incident faded. We rented out 313 again, though most employees avoided mentioning what happened. Then, about a year later, a new desk clerk was covering the night shift. Around 2 a.m. he called me, panicked. He said a woman had walked into the lobby, pale, shaking, wearing a long coat. She looked lost, like she had just woken up from a nightmare. When he asked if she needed help, she said, "I just need my room back." Room 313. He checked the system, and the room was already occupied by another guest. He told her that, and she just smiled faintly and said, "He's not there anymore." Then she turned and walked out into the parking lot. When he ran to look outside, she was gone. The next morning, the guest in 313 checked out early, around dawn. He came to the desk, eyes wide, hands shaking. "There was someone in my room," he said. He claimed he woke up to the sound of the balcony door sliding open and saw a woman standing there staring out into the darkness. When he turned on the light, she was gone. After that, I stopped working nights. The hotel eventually changed names, got new management, new locks, new cameras. But some nights when I drive past that building, I still feel my stomach tighten because I remember that master key I found wedged in the balcony door, and the fact that it matched mine exactly, down to the engraving on the edge. I kept it for a while locked in a drawer, until one morning it was gone and I never told anyone this. But sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I can still hear the sound of a door unlocking somewhere in the dark, slow and careful, like someone who already knows the room number. And that's when I realized the key was never mine to begin with. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Hotels can feel safe, and clean sheets, bright lights. Front desk just a call away, but behind every locked door, there's a story no one wants to tell. If you have ever experienced something terrifying while staying in a hotel, share it down in the comments. Your story might be featured next time. Until then, sleep well. And remember, you never really know who had the key before you.